वफाकी वज़ीर ख़जाना मोहम्मद औरंगज़ेब समिट से खिताब कर रहे हैं, आपको बराह रास्त दिए चलेंगे।
Because while we talk about the economy and we talk about tomorrow and day after, the next month, the next year, in terms of economic recovery and how we move from stabilization to growth, the reality is that if we have to realize our potential in the country, and there have been various studies, and I keep on going back to the World Bank Group study, which while Elango was here, that came out in terms of where we can go as a $3 trillion economy by 2047, by the time we get to 100. But for that, the roadmap that was laid out, it was very clear that these two existential issues have to be recognized and, more importantly, negotiated अगर हमने वो अपना potential पूरा realize करना है। तो ये non-media group obviously led the entire discussion and the public debate, public discourse, and building consensus was earlier on in the year with respect to climate change under Breathe Pakistan, and I was privileged to be part of that discussion as well. And now population. और इसमें जो सबसे important चीज़ है, and I used to say it in the private sector, I've continued to say it now and while I'm in public service, that we have known the what and why for the longest time. There's no dearth of policy prescriptions. Everything has to do now about implementation and execution, and therefore the how part of it. And the way these discussions happened earlier on in the year with respect to climate change, I sincerely hope that in the next couple of days, as these sessions move forward, we will, and all of you will come back with the how part of it. And I'd learned it, I mentioned it in an earlier session a few weeks back as well, when after I took oath and I went for the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, and I was asked to come in and join Finance Ministers Coalition for Climate Change. तो मेरा पहला ज़हन में ये गया कि फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर्स का क्या ताल्लुक है इस सारी चीज़ से. But the reality is, when I went there, and whether it's the OECD finance ministers or they were from the emerging markets, it was quite clear that while the ministers of climate change, and in today's context, the Minister of Health and Minister of Population Welfare are the folks who are going to lead, but it's really the finance ministers which make it and take it mainstream. If we are not making it part of our budgeting process, if we are not making it part of our planning process, then it remains an academic discussion. So I look forward to getting the views on the how part of it when it comes to population. और मैं अगर सारे sessions देखूं, तो I do think almost every possible element has been covered, including at times areas from which we shy from, which is the religious part of it. But Maulana Usmani and Mufti Usmani being here, and I was here when Minister for Health asked him to join us a couple of months back. और उस वक्त मुफ्ती उस्मानी ने different fatwas वो लेकर आए थे और उन्होंने बड़ी डिटेल में एक्सप्लेन किया था, and I'm hoping and assuming that inshallah when he comes here as part of his session he will do a repeat of that this has nothing to do with religion. तो इसलिए हमें उस टॉपिक से और उस चीज़ से हमें आगे बढ़ना है, बिकॉज जब हमारे बड़े जो मोतबर लोग हैं जो इस सारी चीज़ को लीड कर रहे हैं, तो वो अब आप सुनेंगे. बट आई वॉज वेरी इनकरेज्ड विद दैट डिस्कशन बिकॉज वी कैन नॉट shy away from action because some of these elements, hold us back. With respect to the economy, I had a very detailed press conference yesterday, so I'm not going to go into that. In fact, a month back, with my very honorable cabinet colleagues, we also had a very detailed session with the press with respect to structural reforms, whether it's taxation, whether it's energy, SOEs, privatization, right sizing, pension reforms, etc. But few things are very clear. Whether it's the climate change, whatever we do in terms of how we're going to move from stabilization to inclusive and sustainable growth, the GDP does suffer. The flooding this year is going to shave off roughly 0.5% from our GDP growth forecast. So it's real. And with respect to population, the real GDP growth number, wherever we grow, whichever nominal GDP number we get to, is clearly going to be a dampener if we don't manage it and if we don't control it. In that context, it's not only about the economy that we live in today, it's also about the new economy. Because when we talk about the population dividend, and with 64% of our population under the age of 30, this is not about governments giving jobs. I think we have to get out of that mindset. It's the ladies and gentlemen who are freelancers today. It's the ladies and gentlemen who are leading our IT services. Ladies and gentlemen who are leading our IT economy at this point in time. We need to upskill them. We need to reskill them. That's how we are going to go forward with respect to this population dividend. और उसमें AI, digital infrastructure, blockchain, Web 3.0. मैं अभी अली चीमा साहब को अभी ये कह रहा था कि इनको मैं मुबारक दे रहा था कि a Pakistani who has done, American Pakistani, who has done extremely well for himself, and I had the privilege of meeting him in New York on the sidelines of UNGA, who has donated money at your institution to set up blockchain. अगर आज हमारे बच्चे और बच्चियां, they are writing codes at $2, $3, $4 per hour, and if they come up the curve through your institution, sir, and other institutions, as we scale it up, and if they can start writing codes at $12, $13 per hour, they help themselves and they help the country. So the new economy is very, very important. Whether it's, as I said, AI, digital infrastructure, Web 3.0, blockchain, crypto, as we go forward. And I mention it because we keep on talking about how we're going to grow our economy, but the latest chain analysis shows that we are now, as a country, number 3 in terms of crypto participation. We used to be number 10, we are now number 7, and now we're number 3. And it's very important in the context of population, it's very important in the context of youth, because all of us, or most of us, I see a lot of young men and women here, don't take me wrong, but a lot of us are going to fade away. It's this population which is going to lead the country, and therefore having the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority so that we can take this discussion forward for the young ladies and gentlemen who are participating in this activity, but in a regulated way. Now, 2.55% is a statistics. I'm sure all the speakers before me must have talked about it. And I'm sure Country Director Malomo is going to talk about this from a World Bank perspective as well. But the issues related to that 2.55%, if we just leave the GDP number outside, 40% of Pakistani children under the age of 5 stunted. Now, this is intellectual poverty. This is our future workforce. This is the future leadership of Pakistan, which, as they enter with a handicap which we can ill afford. The second one is learning poverty, especially girls out of school. And again, every study, whether it's in Bangladesh, whether it's others, everything that has been talked about is the women participation in the workforce. And therefore, getting these young women back into schools so that they become part of the productive workforce, inshallah, as we go forward. I think the point that Dr. Arif, if I understand correctly, I was just listening to you, and you're absolutely right, because a lot of our premises is based on the fact that if at times we say that 39% of Pakistan is urban, the reality is urbanization has been on the rise. And I do believe that roughly 88% of our population now lives in areas with urban characteristics. And therefore, the context of urban poor, and therefore, ये डॉक्टर साहबा मैंने आपके भी सेशन में ये मैंने बात की थी कि पॉपुलेशन काउंसिल को भी इस पे ज़रा फोकस करना चाहिए, because in the Kachi Abadis, the failure of water, sanitation, hygiene, I think it's going to be very, very critical. Because when I talk about stunting, the reality is we have done interventions on the food side. But the reality is that all of this comes together, whether it's sanitation, is clean water, is spacing between the childbirths. If we want to address stunting, we'll have to do it in a very, very comprehensive way as we go forward. और फिर जो इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस है उसकी हम पहले बात कर चुके हैं कि अगर पॉपुलेशन डिक्रीज होती है उसका कार्बन एमिशंस में although from our perspective is very much around adaptation, but still everything that we need to do in terms of contributing to emissions coming down is also critical. Now, how do we take it forward? Because हर जगह ये बात होती है कि the how part also needs financing. And I think as the finance minister, I would be remiss if I don't talk about how we do and how we finance this transition. Well, I will start with the multilateral support and the support especially from ADB, and then with President Ajay Banga and the 10-year country partnership framework. Now, this is a $20 billion commitment over the next 10 years. Every year, the World Bank has committed $2 billion of help and support and assistance. There are 6 agenda items around that $2 billion support. 4 out of 6 deal with existential issues: climate change and population. And within population, I've just mentioned the learning poverty and the stunting bit. I'm sure the country director will expand on that in terms of what they are going to fund, and the ball is in our court to come up with investable, bankable projects and schemes, and therefore looking forward on the how part of it from this August gathering. The second is what is in our control, and I do think that's very, very important. Because for everything we cannot run to our multilateral partners. For everything we cannot run to international donors. It's not about ego, it's not even about dignity. It's about the resources that we have and making sure that we repurpose these resources and this funding for what we really require in this country. Starting with the flooding. So there was a big discussion whether we should go into an international appeal right away. And the government and the Prime Minister decided we are not going to do that, and I think he was absolutely right. Because we have negotiated in terms of rescue and relief. अगर हम वो भी नहीं कर सकते अपनी resources के साथ, इतना बड़ा मुल्क है, 24 करोड़ का ये मुल्क है, ये न्यूक्लियर कंट्री है, एंड एवरी टाइम कोई एक आफत आती है और उसमें हम फौरी तौर पे भागते जाएं बाहर, ये मुनासिब नहीं है. एंड आई थिंक द प्रोविंसेस and the federation have shown that we can fund the rescue and relief. और आगे rehabilitation और reconstruction की बात होगी, जहां वो है हमारे already funding available है, because we cannot continue to take loans to fund these situations. कोई ग्रांट आती है तो जरूर आए और हम उसको लेंगे, लेकिन ये जो फंडिंग और जो फाइनेंसिंग है और लोन्स लेके इसको हम आगे नहीं लेके जा सकते. तो आई थिंक इन दैट कॉन्टेक्स्ट यूजिंग आवर ओन रिसोर्सेज इज गोइंग टू बी वेरी क्रिटिकल. इसमें एनएफसी की भी अब बात होती है, और आई एम श्योर ड्यूरिंग द कोर्स ऑफ कपल ऑफ डेज दिस इज गोइंग टू कम अप. This is not about us against you or against them or whatever. ये तो सारी चीज वैसी consensus के साथ आगे चलनी है, and part of that is horizontal indices, including the population part of it. And therefore I look forward to very constructive discussions, inshallah, with the chief ministers, the finance ministers during the course of this week, and as we take forward. And I'm very
पाकिस्तान पॉपुलेशन समिट 2025 वफाकी वज़ीर ख़ज़ाना मोहम्मद औरंगज़ेब खिताब कर रहे हैं, और उनकी जानिब से कहा गया है कि नौजवान आबादी को माशी क़ुव्वत में बदलने के लिए जामे पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क नागुज़ीर है.
अभी सब्सक्राइब करें ताकि कोई खबर रह न जाए.